Hi, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm here with Bill Hope. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Hi, good. How you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Hello, chat. Sorry about the time difference. Not sure what happened there, but yes, we are live right now with Bill Hope. Great to see that some of you could stick around after Kathleen's amazing fresco demonstration. She's so incredible. Good to see you, Festus, Jan, if you're still around, Bernadette, D. Oh, bye, D. Have a nice time. It's morning here in Australia, 8:30 in the morning, and we're kicking off. We're continuing the illustration theme with Bill Hope. And so, Bill, I thought maybe we could start off and you could kind of tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a commercial illustrator based near Sydney in Australia, and I've been working in illustration for probably about seven years now. I'm a bit of a generalist, really. I sort of work all across the illustration industry. So I started out doing mainly kind of storyboards and advertising pieces. And over the years, I've sort of branched into doing some more kind of complex crowd drawings, kind of like Where's Wally style things. I do quite a lot of live drawing for audiences. And a little bit of editorial and additional illustration. So I'm kind of scattered all over the place, but I
Mm.
generally work in the field of commercial illustration.
Awesome. Fantastic. And hey, Miguel and Maria in chat. Filipa, hey, from Portugal. Awesome. So good to see you. So I thought we might just kick off by showing a bit of a weekly schedule of what we have happening on this side of the pond. So we can check this out. So this is what's happening this week on Adobe Live. So we're here with Bill Hope. So today it's Tuesday. We are in the future for some of you. So isometric illustration with Bill Hope, something a bit different. We have a mystery guest for tomorrow, and Honor Heroes illustration, which is a campaign that's happening that Adobe has launched. That's been happening for the last week or so. And so Bianca Beers will be joining us, an amazing Sydney artist, and we'll be having a go at that one and designing live. And then on Friday we have Demis Rusley coming back with some creative photography editing. So we have a jam-packed week this week, and we also have some illustration happening on the weekend. So yeah, it is all happening right now. But Bill, I thought maybe we could jump over to your screen, maybe look at a one or two of your pieces of work, and so everyone can kind of get a visual idea of the sort of stuff that you do. Is that cool?
Sure.
You ready
So
over there? Yeah, cool, great.
yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you can see my screen now. So I thought I'd just go to my website and go through a couple of the projects that I've worked on to give you a sense of the kind of thing that I do. And also just going back to the schedule, it's cool to see Bianca there because she makes some awesome stuff. So having a look at my website, I've kind of got it separated into a bunch of different panels here. You can see a bit of a range of work, I imagine. So I've got this crazy yellow guy over here, a bit of editorial, some of my crowd stuff, some more traditional storyboards there. So I'll run you through a couple things. So I like to do a lot of this sort of crazy kind of abstract sort of work. Actually, got this was a personal project I did a couple months back, which ended up turning into a commercial project, which was really great. Some of the larger artworks here. Um, this isn't so much of my commercial stuff, but I do like to work as a exhibiting artist as well. So a lot of these were part of illustrative or art shows that I've hosted in the past. So a lot of this is really sort of detailed, high render stuff. But a lot of the work that I do commercially is much more sort of quicker and fast paced. So I'll go to some of the large format and crowd drawings that I do. So this is something I've kind of fallen into over the years. I've always like to have lots of detail in my work, but more and more I've had clients asking for these sort of really big, complex pictures.
Wow.
So this was a fantastic one for a bank that was doing a Christmas wrapping paper series. So this was turned into wrapping paper that you could buy, and it was all about recycling of products, and it was part of a big sustainability drive that the bank was doing. So that was a really fun one. There's one here which is a big project I did for the Guide Dogs organization in Australia, which was more sort of quick sketches, but we had to sort of blow it up to this enormous scale to be used on the side of a tram. And then this is another example of sort of the really detailed stuff. So this was for an energy company that wanted me to hide one of their service trucks within this big complex illustration. And this is actually a good one to land on, because this is a good example of isometric illustration, which will be what I'm doing today. So a lot of you might know what isometric illustration is. But for those who don't, it's basically drawing without perspective. So as you look into the distance, things get smaller, obviously, but there is a way of drawing where you essentially deny the fact of perspective and things getting smaller, and everything stays in the same scale across the page. So there's no converging of lines into the distance. And you see this turns up in a lot of video games and more kind of technical drawings. So you would see isometric drawings in something like the instructions for a piece of IKEA furniture, or maybe the designs for a Lego set or something like that. It's a really good technical way of drawing. And I'd like to try and animate some of that drawing today. I'll just show you another quick example of isometric drawing. So another big part of my work is doing sort of explainer drawings, or drawings where I'm creating drawings live at an event to sort of explain someone's ideas that they're talking through. So this is a more kind of complex explainer about how an agency works. But then something like this is more of a quick illustration I might do on the fly at a event. So this is something I did for a series of talks in Sydney called Creative Mornings.
Oh, Gabby.
Okay.
Love Gabby.
People turning up in the chat. So
so we got a bit of inception happening there on that screen.
I see.
Nice.
Yeah. And then finally, I'll just run through a couple of the more sort of traditional style illustrations that I do. So these are some watercolors I did for GQ magazine. This is some personal work. Then this was a bit of a digital analog mix that I did for I think it was Headspace, which is a mental health charity here in Australia. So as you can see, quite a range of work, but I'm just going to be doing something very specific today. So we might get started with that. What do you think, Flynn?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So I'll just, as Bill's kind of getting set up, I'll just sort of explain how we do things. How things have been working really well around here is basically we'll go for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll take a bit of a Q&A break to answer those bigger, more difficult head scratcher questions, meaning of life, career, that sort of stuff. But of course, if you have any questions as we're going through, please don't hesitate to ask them in the chat, and we'll get to them while Bill is explaining what he's doing and while he's creating his work. But if we can't, we'll catch everything. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. And then we'll catch everything in the halfway point, and then we'll jump into part 2. So if that sounds cool to all of you, then Bill, you can take it away.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And yes, if people do have questions about anything that I'm doing, please feel free to ask, or if there's more general questions about sort of working in the industry or working from home, anything like that, please feel free to ask. So I'm going to sort of just barrel along into this. So if at any point you need to just stop and sort of take more of a general overview of what we're doing, just leave a message in the comments and we'll try and pick through some things for you. So I thought I'd start with a sketch for this idea that I had. Actually, going back to, I might start at the start. So a little while ago, I was going for a walk with my partner, and we came across this nice cabinet on the side of the road. And we thought it would be nice if we fixed it up, so we took it home. And we discovered after a little while that it had a secret drawer in the back of the cabinet. So if you sort of jiggled a bit of the top of the cabinet, it unlocked a mechanism inside, and this secret drawer popped out of the back. And it was just a cool little thing. And that kind of got me thinking. It would be cool to sort of take this concept of a simple looking cabinet with things popping out of it to a really interesting level. And during this quarantine time, like a lot of people, I've had a bit of time to experiment with different things. And I've been playing around a bit with animation. I should start by saying I'm not an animator by trade. I'm mainly an illustrator, but I'm sort of starting to dabble in that direction. So if you have any serious animation questions, check out Ben Marriott's videos, talk to him. But I can help with the illustration. So, but I'm sure we'll get through it together. So one of the things that appealed to me about isometric illustration is that you can move things in space because they don't get bigger or smaller. You can move things further away in space. You can basically move them in 3 dimensions without having to change the shape of the object. So as something comes towards me, it more sort of slides across the page rather than changing its size. Therefore, it's quite easy to animate because you're simply moving the position of objects in a frame rather than having to frame by frame change their shape. So I'll just quickly run through this video a couple times. So basically you can see we've got this cabinet, the doors open and this crazy face comes out and then parts. I'll play that back. Maybe I'll just put that on repeat for a second. And basically you can see I just have a few elements on layers in Photoshop and I'm just moving them apart and bringing elements together. And as long as they sit in front or behind each other in the correct way, then you can get some really interesting effects. So what I'd like to do with this illustration is see basically how many bits we can have popping out of this simple cabinet, and hopefully we'll come up with a cool animation at the end. So I will just get out of that and then open up our Photoshop file. So this is where I'm at so far with the illustration. I've got my cabinet and I've got a few things coming out of the cabinet. So I'll break down the file a little bit so you can see how it all comes together. So I'd like the animation to start here, just looking for the most part like a relatively simple cabinet. And then I'm going to build up the illustration by adding elements, but piecing them together so they can sort of be evenly broken apart, but still kind of hold together in the animation. So you can see I've got the top of the cabinet on a layer here. I've got the base of the cabinet. I've got my drawer coming out, and I've got all of these organized in folders in my layers on Photoshop. So you can see I've got the colors to this, the base of that drawer, and some of the line work on top. And what I'm going to do with this is, because I've got quite a complex illustration, I don't want to overload the computer by trying to get it to animate the entire Photoshop file. So I'm going to break it into 2 separate files. So I've got one that is called Magic Closet animation file, and then one just called Magic Closet. And what I'll do is I'll sort of finish the illustrations in the main Photoshop file, and then I'll be taking them into the animation file to make them move. So if we run through the animation as it is so far, I'll just zoom out a little bit here so we can see it. What I'm using for animation is I'm using the timeline within Photoshop. So you can do a little bit of basic animation within Photoshop, and if you're someone like me who's just sort of dipping your toes in those waters, it's a really good place to start. You can do 2 kinds of animation. You can do frame by frame, which is the sort of traditional animation that you might see where you're simply drawing a frame after each other and eventually they make a moving image. Or you can do something that's a little bit more akin to the timeline in After Effects, where you have assets and videos and you're manipulating those together. So that's essentially what I've got here. I basically have a series of flat layers illustrations, which you can see in my layers over here. And then those layers are replicated in a timeline. So I can scroll up and down and you can see all my layers just as they are on the side here, but they have the element of time to them, which is across the top here. So currently I think I have this organized as 30 frames per second. Yes, so you can choose a frame rate for the animation, so how smooth you'd like to go at the start. So I can see, looking across the top of the timeline, there's 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 4 second, 5 second, and I can move elements of the illustration across this timeline. So if we slowly drag our cursor along the timeline, you can start to see the elements that have animated. So the top of the cabinet moves across, then this drawer pops out, and finally we have the butterflies appear.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So I can zoom in and use this like Photoshop as you normally would. And then we can see this animation appear over and over again. And that's where we're up to. So what I'd like to do today is to add some elements to, I'm going to finish illustrating some elements for this piece, and then we'll be sort of consolidating those and then putting them into the final animated file and making them move. All right. Any questions so far, Flynn, or should I?
Yeah.
continuing
Absolutely.
that.
So is isometric illustration a recent style for you, or have you drawn like this for a while? That was from Johanna.
It's a good question. I'm trying to think when I first sort of discovered isometric illustration. It's not something that I've locked myself into. It's sort of just something I experiment with every once in a while. I've probably been doing it more consistently for probably about the past 3 years. So I'd say it's relatively recent. Isometric illustration, once you the principles of it are incredibly simple. It's much simpler than perspective. So if you can do perspective drawing, you can definitely do isometric drawing. What I'll do is I'll go into my main Photoshop file where I'm not using the timeline, and I'm just piecing together this illustration, and I'll show you basically the most simple way that you can work in isometric illustration. So the basic principles of it is that you're drawing to a grid. So I have a grid here that I basically Googled isometric grid, and it's basically you've got vertical lines, and then you've got lines going, I think, at 30 degrees either direction. And basically all you're doing is, I'll just give you a quick example now. If I pull up a brush on a new layer, I'll get rid of that grid. If I was traditionally drawing a house, what's going on there? Yeah, so if I was traditionally drawing a house, it's going to, so here's the front of the house. It's going to be a horizon line in the background. As things get smaller, they're going to be moving towards the horizon. So my lines would converge on that horizon, and that's basically drawing in perspective. With the isometric grid, if I was going to draw the house, all the lines follow the lines of the grid. So if I draw the front of the house again, you can see my vertical lines are lining up, and my horizontal lines are going along that diagonal line of the grid. And then I just follow the lines of the grid, like so. Basically, I have the same house, but it's not disappearing into any distance. And the great thing about that is that you're sort of working on this even plane with the drawing. So I can duplicate my house. Sorry, let me just fill that in. I'll just fill in color on the house. And it's kind of like, the best example I can think of, maybe it's showing my age a little bit, but there was a game called Age of Empires where there was a map maker where you could make these cities in a video game. And basically it's kind of like that. You can create assets and then just move them around. So I could create a bunch of these houses next to each other, and they all fit perfectly together because I don't need to change the dimensions of them because they all line up within this grid. I feel like I'm kind of overcomplicating the concept, but that's the bones of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Age of Empires was a fantastic game.
It was a fantastic game. Great. I'm glad someone got it. Okay, so here's our illustration where we're up to so far. So what I'd like to do today is to, if you remember from the earlier video, there was the drawers kind of parting, and there was the head coming out and then splitting in half. And that's the bit I'd like to do today. So I've got my drawer, my base, we've got the butterfly cabinet there. I'll scroll up. So I've pre-prepared this head that's going to emerge from behind these drawers. So I've already made these drawers here. And if you can imagine how they'll animate, they'll sort of slide apart like this. So I've got that nice design on the drawers that you can see there. But we're going to focus on illustrating the head that will emerge from behind those drawers. So if you can imagine, the drawers will part like so, and then we will have this head here which will come forward from out behind those drawers. So that's kind of the idea. I'll just quickly flick back to this video. So that's what we want to happen, but I would like it to be a nice finished colored illustration.
Cool.
Okay.
Where do you come up with your ideas for your subject matter? Like, I'm just thinking of like we've got butterflies, a crane, and then this kind of like devil lady head popping out and separating at some point. But it's not creepy or anything. But it's quite calm. It's quite calming. But where does your inspiration come from?
I thought it was creepy. It's a good question. So with the cabinet, I mean, the look of the cabinet and the idea of a cabinet that opens itself up just kind of had a sort of like Victorian steampunk kind of feel to it.
Hmm.
I was so I wanted to have something like the butterflies kind of makes me think of like an old museum. If anyone has a second, you should Google the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is a fantastic natural history museum in Oxford in England, and it's sort of like the perfect Indiana Jones version of an old museum that you might imagine.
Right.
And they have sort of giant cabinets of sort of shrunken heads and old spears and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's kind of I was kind of thinking in a sort of thematic direction. And with the animation evolving with different new bits popping up, I wanted to sort of sustain people's interest. So I wanted to start with, say, the butterflies popping up, and then I'm going to have a couple other things emerge from the cabinet as well. But I wanted to get sort of incrementally stranger as it went along.
Right.
So that's the idea of having a sort of strange head come out, and then the head breaking apart and there being something else inside the head. I sort of want it to be this kind of like ramping up of interest as the animation goes along.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of the thinking behind it. All right, just shout out if any other questions come through, Flynn.
Will do.
I'll see what I can do. Okay, so if we go back a bit and put those drawers back in place, let's go ahead and focus on this head. So something I've done with this is because I want the head to split apart like this, and there to be a scene hidden inside the head. Instead of drawing the head in two separate pieces and trying to keep those pieces really consistent, what I thought I'd do was I'd make one head and duplicate it and then mask it. So what you can see here is if I disable this mask on the side, I've just got one illustration of a head, but I've masked it into two sections and duplicated it. So I can just edit one head, but then I'll be able to split it apart, but it'll stay editable, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Hmm.
So I've created a smart object. So if I change the top half, it'll affect the bottom half as well. So I can double click on that smart object, and now I'm just editing that file as it is. So what I might do is I might go in and finish these eyes here. So I've got a little sketch layer on top. I'll select a basic brush, and let's start doing some drawing. So
Cool.
it's already sketched in, so it shouldn't be too difficult to knock these guys out.
Do you typically
so I
use
wanted-
the like standard brushes, or do you have like special brushes that you download, or a favorite brush set or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have thousands and thousands of brushes that I have. I'll probably have a sort of top 30 or so brushes that I use all the time that I have organized. If I go into my brushes here, I've got you can see I've got a bunch of folders here. One of the main ones being the Kyle T. Webster Mega Pack that we've talked about in the past, but just lots of brushes that I've collected over the years. But for this, I'm just using the most standard circular brush. I find for line work, unless I'm doing something that's a bit more textured, I'm more than happy just to use the most basic brush. It's sort of, because I'm working with quite a bit of detail, I kind of just want the line to be precise more than anything else. So I'm rushing a little bit here to get it out, but hopefully we'll end up with some passable eyeballs on this lady.
Nice.
Okay. Looking a little skew-eyed there. Drop those brows down a little bit. So I've got the eyes there. I might just delete my sketch layer. And now let's go back in and add a little bit of color. So I wanted this character to be almost like a sort of porcelain doll looking kind of character.
Right.
But of course with green hair and red horns. So I'll take a bit of the green from the hair, fill in those eyeballs, and maybe we'll add a little bit of sort of over the top pink to the lips. Okay, so and maybe I'll just ink a bit of gold into that headdress there. So if I click all layers on my fill brush, I can just tap those sections and color those in. It makes everything nice and quick.
Nice. Yeah, Jan was saying Carl's the man. Yeah, I think Carl might get more shout outs on Adobe Live than possibly anybody else.
I think it's sort of like this magical idea that he was just a regular guy making brushes, and then he was hired by Adobe and now sort of runs the brush world.
Right.
Bit of a creator's fairy tale.
Oh, hey, it's Laurie Goodridge in the chat. Good morning, Laurie. Says hello to you, Bill.
Hi, Laurie. How you doing?
And Greta was asking what tablet or what tablet are you using?
Oh, so I'm using the Mobile Studio Pro by Wacom. So it's one of their standalone computers. So it's a computer and a tablet all in one. I don't know if I can lift it up briefly, if you can see it in the camera there.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like a Cintiq screen that you just draw directly on the screen, but this is a Windows 10 tablet. So I have a couple of different. I'm actually in the middle of moving house right now, so I'm sort of on the go. So this is my mobile setup at the moment. But,
when you say you're in the middle of moving your house, you're literally like you've just left basically the bare minimums in the house.
I have an internet connection here, so I'm in an otherwise completely empty, abandoned house right now with my setup, and I've moved everything to the new house. But because the internet, I literally was carrying cabinets and things yesterday, so I'm a little sore today. But so I'm very much on the move. So this is my mobile setup for now.
Nice.
But I have like a desktop setup that I have at home. So if I go back to my main file, you can see that because it's a smart object, I've been editing in another file, but it's imported all those changes into my current file. But because it's I've duplicated that smart object, I can still break them apart and move them around, but all the changes that I make will be imported in. So if I start painting a little bit of shadow into this face here, so I'll choose a color. I'll add a bit of shadow. The eyes and nose. Sort of get through this relatively quickly. Add a bit of a sort of whitish glow to parts of that. But the nice thing about this process of importing smart files is that I can have the object and move it around and get it to where I want to be. But at any time, I can come back in and start sort of finessing this as much as I wanted to really bring it to life. But I'll just quickly knock out a bit more of this. And then you can see if I go click save that file, and now it's into my main file, and I can still move it around. So that's the benefit of the setup that I've got there. So,
nice.
All right. So let's do a little brushing. So I might find some more the textured brushes that I like to use. This is another one of the Kyle T. Webster ones, one of his ink ones, which has got a really nice flowy feel to it. Do a little bit of work on the hair. Let's add a bit of shadow to these horns. Maybe we'll just do highlights. And then give a bit of the same treatment to this golden headdress.
Nice. Jan was saying, as a Mac user, I think it's great to see creatives using Windows fonts. Yeah, it's quite interesting with the camps that we're all in. For all my mobile stuff, I've always had a Mac laptop, but I've also always had a PC for more gruntier kind of things. Have you always been PC, Bill, or do you use both? Or
No, I use both. I'm actually the reverse of you, Flynn. I use a Mac for all my more heavy duty stuff, and a PC for my mobile stuff. I'm kind of the
there you
reverse.
go.
But yeah, I've increasingly sort of stopped caring about which
Yeah.
one I'm using. For the most part, unless I'm doing any really sort of high end work, computers can handle most of the work that I'm doing, and I'm using the same program in them. So at some point, my brain stopped caring about where the hotkeys were, and that doesn't bother me either now. And
Mm.
yeah, so I'm just not fussed really. Um, okay, so what I wanted, actually, something the chat could really help me out with here is that I've got my head. I'm feeling happy enough with how it's looking. Um, so what I want to happen is I want this head to slide forward like so, and then the top of the head to break back and reveal this scene happening within. Um, and I'd quite like there to be something or somebody having dinner with this person here. So if anyone has any suggestions for who this person's having dinner with, is it a banana or a fish or a bottle of wine? I don't know. If anyone has any suggestions, that would be great, and I
Awesome.
will sketch that in to finish that section.
All right. Well, let's see if anyone from chat has a suggestion for what this man is, who this man is dining with. Let's do that for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so if anyone's having a think about that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to import these cabinet drawers into my animation file. So I've finished working on them. I'm happy with the render of those. So I'm just going to drag them and drop them into my animation file. Now, if we bring the timeline back up and start looking at that again, you can see they've appeared in my layers, and they've also appeared in the timeline. And they've just appeared where the marker for the timeline is at this point. So you can see it was just in front of those butterflies popping up. So that's where they've arrived. But I don't really want them there. I want them to arrive. Actually, they're going to be on the cabinet the whole time. So I've got to go right back to the start. So let me drag those, and then you can see they've appeared there in the first frame of my animation. I'll need to position those. So let me just put them into the right place.
Some great suggestions coming through.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so if we play back my animation, you can see that they're stuck in the same place while my cabinet moves. So I'm going to need to fix that. So if so in the timeline, you can see the layout where I've got my two panels here. If I drop down that, you can see I've got a couple of options for animation within the timeline. And the one that I want to use is just called position. And basically that just means you can move it up, down, or across. You're not changing the shape of the image, you're simply moving it. So because I want them in that place at the start, I'm just going to click the position, and I get a little timestamp. Sorry, this is the most basic animation thing. Flynn, can you help me here? What are the little... It's a keyframe.
Keyframe.
Okay, and then I'm going to wait until I start to see my cabinet move. So my cabinet starts to move at exactly 1 second. So I'm going to add another keyframe to both those layers to tell them just to stay in place for that second. Now, as my cabinet moves, I'm going to keep watching it move in the timeline. And then it stops moving at exactly 2 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my two cabinet drawers, and I'm going to reposition them to be in exactly the same spot. And because I've moved them, it's given me a timestamp at 2 seconds. And now, if we zoom out, my cabinet drawers should move nice and smoothly with the top of the cabinet.
Nice.
So if we go back out into our animation and we press play, it moves across. Then our drawer comes out and our butterflies merge. So that's all working well. Okay, if I go back to my drawing file, do you want to hit me with some suggestions, Flynn?
Yeah, here we go. So, octopus,
Mm-hmm.
um, dinner with a clock,
Yep.
Medusa,
Okay.
and
Yep.
then Salvador Dali clock. So that's being qualified again, and then penguin.
Penguin. Okay.
So octopus,
Look,
clock,
they're
Medusa,
all
or
fantastic
penguin.
suggestions. For the sake of time, I think I'm going to go with penguin because Medusa and octopus both involve lots of tentacle hairs, and clocks are a bit technical for this time in the morning. So I'm going to go with penguin. And
Cool.
also, I've recently done a drawing with a bunch of penguins in it, so I feel penguin confident.
Nice.
Um, okay, so I've just added a filter on top of my work that I was working on, which basically brightens everything up because I want to start sketching on top of it and just makes it a bit easier to see. So I'll just get a really basic brush out and let's start thinking about penguins. So penguins have got a pretty basic shape to them. But maybe we could have this penguin being in some sort of um, uh, passionate philosophical discussion with this guy at dinner. Um, so we're going to keep him pretty quick and cartoony. This guy. Um,
Why are we in a lady's head?
yeah. Okay, so I've got a really basic sketch for my penguin. All right, I'm going to drop
Man,
the
that's
opacity on
fast.
that layer, and I'm going to start doing some line work. So the beacon. I recently did a picture for a book that I've been working on, which had a page which had probably 100 penguins running around on it.
Oh,
So
wow.
um, I've had a bit of penguin practice recently, which I would recommend all prospective illustrators out there do at least an hour of penguin practice every day. It's amazing
Penguin.
how often it comes up in work, and it's an essential skill for anyone going into the creative industry.
That's good advice. Are they fairy penguins in your book?
I don't
They
like to
just.
put labels on them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just going for a. I think actually it was let's say an emperor penguin, is
Right.
the reference I was looking at. But it doesn't have the little feather thing on the side of its head, so I don't know. Okay, so we're going for speed penguin here. So let me create a new layer to put some color on. Let's fill that guy in.
Popular this morning.
Yeah, sorry about that. My million alarms going off. Sorry to
That,
people I couldn't go with your suggestions on. If we had more time, I would work on a Medusa.
I think that would be a really fun stream to do with you, to do a interactive with chat stream, because you can draw off the fly like no one else I know.
Ah, thanks. Well, if anyone is keen to um, uh, get anything sketched, I'm actually doing another stream today through the agency that
Oh
I'm
yeah,
represented by.
awesome.
So while I'm working with Penguin, I'm represented by an agency in Australia called the Jackie Winter Agency, and they sort of help me with managing the jobs I take on. And they've been running a series on a blog called Homeroom, where basically, because everyone's in quarantine, they're trying to just sort of get their artists out there by having a series of live streams. And I'm going to be doing one at 1:30 today, where basically I'll be doing sketch by request. So if anyone's got anything they want drawn, you should hop onto that one. So if you go to Jackie Winter Homeroom,
I've dropped it in there.
they
Dropped a
all
link in the chat as well. Make it easy for everyone to find,
amazing.
because that
Thank
will be
you.
awesome. I'll be there.
Cool. All right, so I'm happy enough with how this penguin's looking. Um, Now I'll just get rid of that filter layer that I had, and now our penguin
Amazing.
is in our scene. I'll get rid of the sketch layer as well. Now I might just flatten all those layers because I'm happy with how that's sitting.
Just letting, yeah, so we got 13 and a half minutes until kind of a bit of a Q&A break. Just letting everybody know, so we can have some bigger, more lengthy questions come through. We can kind of focus on those in that section.
Brilliant. Okay, so now that we've entered our penguin, our head should slide back and penguin conversation is happening, which is great. Okay, so it gets a little bit complicated here, but I'll try and take it slow. So right now I'm working in my my more complex Photoshop file. I've got all my layers and I'm keeping everything editable, so I can go back and make changes if need be. And what I'm going to do is, because I don't want the computer to be having to animate all those layers separately, I'm just going to be taking things into the animation file and just flattening all the layers onto one layer. And that just gives me, if I need to change those layers, I can always go back and make edits and then bring them back in. But for now, it's just going to be easier if I flatten those layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the top and the bottom of the head and the dinner scene inside, and I'm just going to drag those all into my animation file. Now if we zoom in, what I'll do now is I'll just flatten all of those. So Control E on a PC is the shortcut. So, no, it's not. I'm just going to rasterize them. Okay, so I've got all of those in my animation file. Now let's just recap where we're up to on our animation so far. So the cabinet starts here, it slides across to the right, the drawer slides out to the left, our butterflies emerge. All right, now we've got our head popping up. In the timeline, because these aren't video files, they're just objects, if you need them to last longer, you basically just drag the duration of those files out. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to drag all the layers that I want out a bit further. Now, this head needs to sit behind the cabinet drawers. And that's a nice easy fix in this. I can just grab them in my layers and just literally drag them underneath. And they don't actually have to appear until the point that I want the drawers to open. So I want the drawers to open just after the butterflies have come up. So let's say at 6 seconds. So I can scroll down to my head layer here, and I'm just going to drag those all up to 6 seconds. So then it doesn't really need to be there until 6 seconds. Now, if I uncheck the visibility on those drawers in front, we see the heads there. Because the head is going to be emerging from out of the cabinet, we don't really want to have the back there. Let me just get rid of those masks. So what we're going to do is we're going to mask those layers. And what that does is it doesn't delete any part of the file. It will just, see, those can go together. It'll just hide a section of it, and there's a way that we can be able to move the object within those masks. So I'm just going to start making a selection with my selection tool. And basically what I want is I want the object to only appear outside the bounds of this selection. And that will come clear why I'm doing this in a second.
Nice.
So I'm going to make the selection down here. I'm just using the polygon selection tool. Okay, so if I bring the top of my head back, I should be able to click the mask there Now, if I uncheck the link between what's happening inside my layer and the mask itself here, now I can grab this head and move it in and out like that. So it looks like it's emerging from out of the cabinet.
Yeah.
I don't destroy any section of it. So nice. I'd like the same mask to apply to this layer below. So I'm just going to go Control-click on the mask, and it's selected the same mask, and I'll hit mask on there as well. And now if I select both my layers, I can move them in and out like so, and I don't lose anything. Okay, so where are we at? If I put those back on. So let's not worry about the face for now. What we want is these cabinet doors to slide apart to reveal the face. We said it was going to be at 6 seconds. So if we go to our cabinet doors here, I'm just going to apply another keyframe to the cabinet doors to tell them something's about to change and that they're meant to be staying there. So let's press this little diamond icon on both the layers. And now they both have a new keyframe. Now, in the past I've had them moving together, but they need to go in opposite directions now. So I want this animation to go for about 1 second. So I can see on my timeline, I'm currently at 6 seconds. So let's just move it along to 7 seconds. And I will grab this and move it up here. Then I will, so we can see now, it's just going to slide to the right. Nice. Now let's do the same. We're at 6 seconds on the left side of the doors. Now I'm going to slide that over to 7 seconds, and I'll move this across here. Now they should open together like so. If I was working in After Effects or some more complicated animation software, I would have the ability to sort of easy ease, add some effects to these motions, really smooth them all out. But we're just working sort of on basic principles of animation now, keeping it pretty simple. So we're just going to leave that as it is for now. So they'll just slide out. Nice. Now, if I put my head back in, and let's move that into position to about here. Now, if we go the whole way back through our animation, slides across, cabinet comes up, doors separate, and ta-da, we've got a head there.
Nice.
Something I had forgotten to add here is that there's no background to the head. So I'm going to really quickly go in and knock that out. So if I minimize all those things, basically what I want is to show the interior of this cabinet. So it's we're going to make this really rough. I'm just going to select that area. I'm going to make a new layer. I fill it in with a nice dark brown. I might show a little bit of light coming up for the floor. Okay, we can go back and fix that up, but that'll do for now. So we're just going to say that's the interior of the cabinet. So let's make our head and drawers visible again. Okay, now I just need to drag this so it's visible at the moment it appears, and now we're seeing the interior of the cabinet now, which looks a bit better. Okay, so we've got to the point where the drawers have opened and we're ready for the head to emerge. But basically, like I did with the doors of the cabinet before, I want to move the top and the bottom of the head together before I separate them. So again, we're going to go into our timeline, and let's scroll up to where we've got the top and the bottom of the head there. We're going to drop the arrows for each layer. And we are going to put a timeline in at the put a keyframe in at the very start for both of them to tell them to stay there. once the doors have fully opened, I'm going to put another keyframe in, tell them to stay in place. And then let's give it 1 second to emerge forward. So in this time, I'm going to grab both of my layers, the top and the bottom of the head. I'm going to bring it forward to about here. Now, the more perceptive of you will have noticed that we've come into a bit of an issue here in that the cabinet doors up to this point had been in front of the face, but now we need it to be behind the face. So at the point where so now we've got our head moving forward. At the point here where the head's about to start to move forward, basically I need to do a bit of movie magic trickery and switch the position of the right side of the cabinet doors to behind the head. Now, the way I'm going to do that is instead of moving that layer or do anything clever with that, I'm just going to make another layer in exactly the same place. So essentially, another layer will appear below it at exactly the same time that the layer above disappears.
Right.
So we're going to do that at exactly the point the head starts to move. And if we look at our timeline, that's exactly at 7 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this layer here. So that's the top of the drawer. And I'm just going to drag that back so it disappears at 7 seconds. So just when the head starts to moving, that side of the drawer is going to disappear. Now I will duplicate that layer and I'm going to drag that one forward. Don't think it has any. So now if it appears and reappears in the wrong position, but that's okay, I can move it. So I'm just going to get those two to overlap, and now I'm just going to reposition that exactly on top of where it was before. Now all I need to do is drag this new layer below the head and really hope that this works. So I'm going to drag it below the head, and now the head begins to emerge, and now it goes in front of the old layer.
Nice.
I'm hoping that made sense. How about you, Flynn?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Good. Okay, so now we've got drawers opening, head emerging. Brilliant. So up to this point, the bottom and the top of the head have been moving together, and now I want to separate them. I might give it a couple of beats in the animation, let's say half a second, for people to sort of register that a head has emerged from this cabinet.
Right.
And so if I'm
you wanted to pause. You wanted to pause for a second before you start slicing that head off.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like it to be just a very short pause there. So if we're looking at layers of the head, so as you can see, it's getting a bit busy in the timeline now because I've got so many objects going on. So I'm just going to drop all of those menus that we've been looking at. I'm just going to reduce all those so we've got a bit more of a manageable timeline. Now I've got so let's just recap where we're up to. It's come out, we're giving it half a second, and then I want the top of the head to slide back to reveal the scene underneath. So let's get our keyframes back. I'm going to add one more keyframe there, and then I think I will give it just a couple of seconds to slowly reverse back and reveal our angry penguin dinner scene. Okay, so there we go.
Amazing.
Again, we've just lost some of the other scene because they've dropped out of the timeline. So I'm just going to bring all the layers that we want up to where we've got up to. So I'm just going to extend all of those out.
Very good. While you do that, our timer is down, so we are at the halfway point. So it's time for some Q&A. So I've noticed some people that are on YouTube or Periscope or anything like that. Just jump over to behance.net/live to ask your questions. We have a few in chat, but I'll wait until you're ready before I start firing them off, Bill.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just quickly play that back and make sure we're all good. Okay. Okay. We've lost our butterfly draw, so I'm just going to extend that out as well. Okay. I will. Okay. Sorry. Give me 1 sec, Flynn. I just want to
No.
replay
Take your time.
this back.
Take your time. That's we're all good.
Okay. Here we go. So it's quite small, but I'll zoom in here, and that's where we're up to. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm ready. Let's chat.
Prepared. All right. Well, yeah, we have a couple of questions from chat. More of a technical question. What DPI do you work with usually, and does it depend on the type of client work? Because yeah, you have such diverse work. So are you? And I also add, like, do you work in CMYK or RGB?
Yes. So recently, I've been working on a publishing project recently, so it needs to be in CMYK. So it's my first time actually working fully in CMYK. And it is interesting I'd love to learn more about what's technically going on behind the scenes of when you're changing sliders or altering hues within CMYK and why that affects images differently. It's been really interesting to play around with it. So 90% of the time I'm using RGB because the images that I'm using will either be converted to CMYK by a printer or are just going to live on computer screens. So
Right.
So RGB for the most part is my go-to. But recently I've been doing a bunch of stuff in CMYK. So both, I mean, unless it is specifically for a print reason, I'm sure there is a reason to use CMYK, but I would stick with RGB. That's fine. In terms of resolution, standard for print is 300 dpi. So most of the time I just work in 300 dpi. But when you're working digitally, it doesn't matter. It's just about the pixels. It's just about what the amount of pixels you have in the image is. So
Right.
Regardless of the scale of the image and the dots per inch, the computer's only calculating it based on pixels. So just by default, I do everything at 300 dpi. Sometimes you'll scale up or scale down for different things. Something I've started doing is I've been doing a bunch of large format, sort of like big mural pieces that are digital. And with something like that, if you've got an image that's like I did one recently for city of Melbourne, and it was 4 meters long, and it was 6 meters long, and 6 meters long at 300 dpi is just killing your computer in terms of pixels to work with. So I did the whole thing. The dimensions of the file would be 6 meters, so I know where I'm at. But I just reduced everything to 150 dpi because if you're looking at something that's 6 meters long, you're very unlikely to be getting close enough to recognize the difference between a 300 dpi print or a 150 dpi print. So it really depends on the job basis, but whatever's useful at the time.
Yeah, cool. Festus was asking, do you sometimes include music in your animations? Have you done that yet?
A little bit. If you go onto my Instagram, which is billhope_art, you can see a bunch of animations that I've done recently. There was one that I did with a friend who lives in New York and was sort of telling a story about something, what's going on in New York right now. And for that, I went into GarageBand and wrote out a very small amount of music. And that was really fun. But I'm not a musician, so I'd love to do more of it, but it hasn't been a big part of it. There's another animation there, which is it's another isometric one, which is of sort of like a machine printing humans. You'll just have to have a look to see what I mean. But that's all just me making noises into a microphone and then layering them over each other to make the noises for that. So
That counts.
I'm at very early stages. It's pretty basic right now.
Yeah, that counts. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Lena,
mindfully.
we did show some work at the beginning, but there's been a lot more people that have joined since the stream has begun. So one of the questions was, have you worked with isometric illustrations for business purposes before? And can you give some examples? So maybe we could just show one of those examples that you showed at the beginning for those that may have missed it.
Yep. So here's one which was a big piece for energy company. So this was a image that they mailed out to I think like 60,000 customers, and it's like a find a thing kind of picture. So you're seeing this, okay, Flynn?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is as Wally style piece. That's all isometric. I'll show you another one, which was down here. So this was an explainer piece for the agency that I work with, Jackie Winter. One of the really good things about isometric drawings is that because you kind of have this even view across, because things aren't becoming smaller in the distance, it's kind of good for explaining plans or dimensions. You kind of can see a three-dimensional object, but you get to see all sections of it at the same scale.
Yeah.
So I really like using it for something like this, where it's very easy to manipulate and move into the places you want things and organize information. So I find it a really good way to, sort of get thoughts down on paper. And I've actually done a number of pictures like this for corporations that have hired me to say, like, I did one recently where they had a new sort of stakeholder strategy for their HR department, and they wanted to explain what that meant across the organization. So I would do an isometric drawing of all the different sections of the organization and different things happening in them like that. So I've actually had quite a bit of work doing those kind of drawings recently. So it's been really good.
Yeah, very cool. Dan was saying you could illustrate and make a puzzle game in this kind of style really well, like point and click.
I mean, if anyone's played the game Monument Valley, that's all in isometric illustration, and they've done some incredible things. They've sort of used all the trickery, all the tools that you can with an isometric illustration to turn it into this magnificent game. And they're Sydney-based, actually. So you should definitely check out Monument Valley if you haven't. That's really interesting what they've done.
It's created by us too.
Yes.
Very cool. Maybe one or two more questions. Where did you learn to draw so quickly and confidently?
I've sort of... so I do a lot of... I'll try and show you some more of the live drawing stuff that I do. So actually, this is a bit of an explainer. I do a lot of drawing at events where I'll go along and I'll set up my computer and I'll be projecting onto a screen. Basically, here's a little sketch of me at my computer. There'll be a bunch of people in an audience. A speaker will come in, and while they're giving the talk, I'll be drawing in the background and it'll be projecting onto a screen. And I've been doing this work for a couple of years.
That's how we met.
And I actually started doing it with Flynn years back, when Flynn ran Creative Mornings in Sydney. And I think it really comes from, I think I was very... When I first started in illustration, I was always a quick drawer. I always liked trying to turn things around quickly. But I started off doing storyboarding in agencies. And essentially what you're doing in there is you're taking in your computer or your sketchpad and you go into a new workplace where you've never met anyone and you're being paid by the hour to generate storyboard sketches. So you'll have a art director come up to you and say, we need these 15 boards today, get to it. Right. And you just have to turn around as many of these storyboards as you can. And it's an incredibly stressful environment. Because you're meeting new people and having to deliver drawings in person. And because you're being paid by the hour, you feel a strong need to deliver. And this was years ago. Things have changed now, but it used to be quite well paid, and it was certainly well paid for what I was used to from my retail job. So it was just in this environment where I felt this incredible pressure to turn around drawings quickly, and I did that for a couple of years, and that's kind of like a bit of a what's the term? Sort of like a initiation by fire kind of thing.
Right.
Sort of
Yeah.
felt
Like you were thrown in the deep end immediately.
I was definitely thrown in the deep end. Yeah, and it was just something that I became. I found that it was a big asset to clients. Like they got more bang for their buck in the simplest sense. And sort of I became sort of known as Bill who turns around drawings really quickly. And once it was kind of your thing, people would say, I hear Bill does a lot of storyboards quickly. Can he do this crazy job for me? And so it was kind of a bit of a vicious circle in that way. And I'm trying to slow down now and sell myself more in quality rather than quantity. But it was just a style that I developed, and it's served me reasonably well up till now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely loved having you when we've done events and you've been scribing for us. The biggest problem that we had was that people would be far more interested in what you were drawing than whatever the person was presenting, and that happened 9 out of 10 of the times.
Right.
We never really worked out a way to tackle that, but you're like watching you go that fast and how visually interesting it is. It's really incredible and a kind of a sight to behold.
Cool,
So we've probably got time. Yeah, sorry. So we've probably got time for one more. I've told you that 1,000 times, so I know you know that I believe that. So Seth, last question. For generating ideas for more of your complete isometric pieces, do you make mood boards or collect visual ideas online, or do you try not to kind of look at too much stuff and just kind of generate the ideas, just in the as you're going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I could go on for a while about this. I think there's a really interesting sort of dichotomy with how much reference you use and how much you stick to mood boards. Sometimes a client will send me a mood board, and it's actually often helpful to just get a sense of where their head's at in terms of like what colors they want to use and what reference. I don't use a lot of it. I think I had a bit of a I don't know, it was probably more of an ego thing than anything else earlier on in my career, where I sort of didn't want to use reference very much. I thought it was like a sort of like a more purist approach to not use reference. And I've really sort of, so for a long time, I was trying to just do everything out of my head. And that definitely helps with speed. But using reference is super helpful. So I do it all the time now. And I'm definitely open to too much sort of having reference available. But I think it's just making a balance for yourself where the reference is enhancing an idea that's come out of your head rather than guiding what you're drawing.
Right.
So I think when you overly rely on mood boards or reference, you sort of become almost a sort of victim to the reference that you have, and your work, it becomes a little bit too fused to someone else's work, I think, sometimes. So having a reference available as inspiration or technical assistance is great, but as long as it feels like it's something that's enhancing your original idea rather than guiding it. So I will often just have it on a separate layer, and I can flick back to it whenever I need, but not becoming sort of slave to your inspirational reference. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Wow. Great advice. Well said. Okay, great. Well, thanks for the questions, everybody. We're in the second half. Bill, do you want to jump back into the second half of what you're going to show us?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've made pretty good progress so far, I think. If you're joining us now or anything, we are making a animated isometric cabinet. So where we're up to right now is we've got kind of interesting but relatively sort of innocent looking cabinet, and then if we slide our timer, it starts to slide apart and bits are appearing, and then we've got these drawers opening and this head appearing, and that's where it's at right now. What I might quickly do is I might just show everyone the export function on Photoshop, just so we can try that out.
Cool.
Actually, a couple of little hints in using the timeline is that I'm using this Wacom computer, and it's relatively fast. It's got a good processor. It's got good RAM. But you can overload the system and make playback on these kind of programs quite slow. And right now, if it's hard to see on the stream, but Photoshop basically generates frames as you go along. So the more you slide back and forth this slider, the smoother the animation will become. And there's a couple of ways you can help that along. So if you go to this little cog in the timeline, there's you can see I've got my resolution set to 50%. So that basically means I'm asking Photoshop to only deliver 50% of the pixels when I play back the animation. And that makes the playback quite a bit smoother, so I can see what I'm doing. If I had too many pixels there, it would really slow down the computer, and it would be a much jerkier animation I would be able to see as I was working on it. So if I go to the panel settings here, there's a little drop-down menu, and you can see there's just an option to render video. So I'm just going to click that. The size of the file relatively small. I've tried to not overlay it with folders, and all of this is to help the render times, basically. So if anyone's ever done anything with 3D, then their render times are incredibly slow. With this kind of animation, they're a bit faster, but it all depends on how much information you're asking the computer to process and how quick your computer is.
Right.
I'm just delivering it as a HD video. So I'll just click render. I'm replacing the existing one there, and hopefully it'll work as it's worked before, and it actually renders pretty quick. So
I was about to. Oh, sorry. I was about to say we're going to try. Speaking of asking your device to do a lot, are we going to ask it to export while we're streaming? But we are, and it seems to be working pretty well.
This is a test for Wacom, doing some live rendering here. So as you can see, it's got quite a lot of pixels to work through, but it's doing pretty well. This is moving pretty quickly. So we don't really need to do this, but it'd be nice to just do a test. Sometimes I find with this kind of animation, you want to make sure your playback speed is what you thought it was, because the playback speed in the program is not always the same as it is in the final product, because the computer's trying to sort of render it live. So it's good to do a couple of sort of test exports and make sure it's working okay. So if I go to my file now, I open it up. At 30 frames per second, it's playing really nice and smooth. So that's worked great. So that's our file. Okay, it drops out a little bit at the end there, but that's my fault rather than the render.
That's why you test. It's a good test.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to lose my puffer jacket. It's a little warming up with all this animation going on.
Bit of a background. Bill's in the Blue Mountains in Sydney at the moment. So at the time that we asked him, the time we asked him to get up, it would have been probably quite cool up there.
A little bit chilly, yeah.
A bit chilly in the morning, yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of animated all the assets that we have so far, but I'm hoping to add a couple more in the time that we've got remaining. So sitting innocently on top of the cabinet the whole time have been these panels here. If I just zoom in, you can see them. And they're actually separate to the base panel, but I've just tracked them on so it moves at the same place. So it looks like they're attached to the top panel. So if I just flick those on and off, you can see which ones I'm talking about. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like those to, if I grab one, I'd like them to sort of slide out of the way to reveal something interesting underneath. So if I just put that back in position. So maybe to increase the interest as the head slides back, so that's at exactly 8 seconds, I might get these panels to move out of the way as well. So again, I've got my panel file, I've dropped down, I'm gonna click make a keyframe in the transform controls. And then over the space of maybe a second and a half for these ones, I'll do it nice and slow, I will move those down to the next position. So now it waits and then slides into position there. Now I'll go and do the same thing to the above panel. So let's go to exactly 8 seconds when it's about to start moving. I'm going to put a keyframe in, and I'm just going to slide that up. Oh, sorry, I got to get the right point in the timeline. Now I'm going to move it. Now, there we go. So the door's open, head comes out, breaks apart, and while that's happening, these panels will move across as well.
Cool.
Now, I'd like there to be something interesting underneath those panels. So let's go back to my original file I was working on. For anyone just joining, I've got a separate animation file and a kind of working file where I'm putting all the pictures together. I'll save that as well. Now, underneath those panels that are sliding apart, I wanted there to be a couple interesting things. Now we're going to get into some slightly more complex animation here. So I've got, in this top section, I've got a couple things. I've got this balloon, and this is something I was hoping to have a sort of house on a sort of little stand, and then I want this balloon to expand after it comes out of the panel. That was one option. And then the other one that I've got is this kind of glass jar I wanted to appear. So I've already drawn the glass jar and added some sections to it. But I wanted there to be a fish swimming around inside this glass jar. So I've gone ahead and pre-prepared some things so we don't have to do all of that during the stream. So what I might do is I might take my glass jar as it is now. I'm going to drag it into my animation file. I might just compress it all down into one image. And it's actually just missing some sides to the glass jar, so I'm just going to draw those in quickly. Maybe we'll make them greeny blue. Okay, so all will be revealed in a second when I put this in. So the idea is that I'll have this glass jar, it'll be hidden the whole time within the closet, and then as the panels slide apart, it will be revealed underneath. So the panels are here. I'll grab my glass jar. Where are my panels? And I'm going to place that underneath the jar, underneath the panel. So if you remember from earlier when we were making the header merge, I needed to mask off a section of the layer so it can be revealed as if it's coming out from inside the cabinet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my polygon selection tool to mask off that edge. So I'm just going to make a selection there. Expand that selection right down. Need a little bit more. Now if I drop my glass jar into it and mask it, done it the wrong way around. Now our glass jar sits nicely inside inside the cabinet.
Amazing.
And if I grab it, I can move it up and down like it's emerging. So let's put the lid back on that. Just grab a jar. Okay, so here it is. So I only need the jar to appear just as it's about to be revealed. So at 8 seconds, this starts to move out of the way, and now we can see that our glass jar is tucked nicely underneath that panel. Okay, so all our animation has finished up to that point. Now I'm just going to again extend all the elements out so they exist for the animation.
Amazing stuff.
Cool. I could have made these really long at the start. I think that probably would have been a better approach, but we'll just have to do it incrementally as we extend the animation. I'm sure there's a bunch of real animators out there sort of banging their heads against walls of all the shortcuts I could be making here, but doing the best we can.
That's always the disclaimer. Everybody comes on and everyone shows their process and says, "I'm sure there's lots of other better ways to do it," but absolutely everybody that we have on that comes on and shares their process always has that disclaimer.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm sort of like intruding into animated's territory. I'm gonna have Ben married after me. Okay, so here's where we're up to so far. All the sections coming apart, and our glass jar has been revealed. Just notice that top panel is disappearing, and I'm guessing I just haven't extended that out far enough, which is the case. So I'm just going to drag it out. Okay.
Cool.
Now, once these panels are in place, I'd like that glass jar to emerge. So, stopped. Let's give it a second. So at 10 seconds, on our timeline, I'm just going to find my glass jar, and let's do the old keyframe dance again. I'll put a keyframe in, and I will give it, I'm going to give it a full 2 seconds this time to emerge. Have a nice slow reveal.
Nice.
Okay, again, we've come into that issue of layering the elements of the animation so they fit nicely on top of each other. You can see, even though our jar emerges nicely, it's going underneath the panel behind it, which is no good. So the way we're going to fix that is we're going to do the same as we did before with switching out the doors opening around the head. So I'm going to find that top panel, which is here. And I'm going to reduce it down so it disappears at that point. And then I'm going to copy it, drag it to underneath the glass jar so it reappears. And it will continue from that point. Oh, but we need to get it in place. So I am just replacing that element. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry, folks, just making sure I've got that in exactly the right place so it appears at the right time. Okay, great. So now our jar appears in front of that element. Now, I said I was going to have a fish swimming around inside that jar, and now I'm really going out of the bounds of Illustrator non-animator here and trying something a little tricky. So something I prepared earlier was this file here, which is a fish swimming about in some water. Now, I created this in another program using some frame-by-frame animation. So I've made a really simple frame-by-frame animation of this fish swimming around. So with this one, I've literally just been layering images of this fish with slight differences along the way to get it swimming around like that. Then what I've done is I've taken those images into Photoshop and I have made a frame-by-frame animation of it. And then you can just convert those to a smart object like you would with any files. So if I double-click on this fish, it will take me to a full, and then double-click inside that. I've kind of got like babushka dolls of smart objects. So you can go deeper and deeper into that file, and then you can see individual sections of that smart object. Well, that's a very long-winded way of saying basically we've got a fish that we can use.
We got a fish who swims.
Yeah, we've got a fish that swims.
I like it.
And the fish is swimming just fine. So I'm going to grab that and I'm going to drag that into my animation file. All right, where's my fish? This is the question.
Here, fishy, fishy.
Where's he gone? Okay, found my fish. Okay, so here's my fish file. Basically, I want to pair that to my glass jar, fits nicely inside the glass jar. So here's my glass jar. I'm just going to disable that layer mask for a second so I can see the whole thing. And I'm going to grab my fish and I'm going to position it inside the glass jar. Now we can just shrink it down so it fits nice and neatly inside there. Right, so it's going to be there the whole time. Now you can see with everything going on, I've got my fish swimming about in the water.
Awesome.
Now what I need to do is I need to make that fish move. So I've basically imported a video into a video. So the video is acting like any normal raster layer in Photoshop. So just like if I had a new layer and I draw a squiggle and I'm animating this squiggle, Photoshop's going to treat the animation of the fish kind of just like the squiggle. Which makes things really easy for someone like me who is just figuring all this stuff out as we go along. So I'm going to enable my layer mask on the glass jar. And now I'm going to copy and paste that same mask onto my fish animation. Sorry, just before I do that, what I might do is I might duplicate this fish because I want it to be swimming for a little while. I'm just going to duplicate it a couple times so we've got a longer animation, and I'll just move all of those together.
And I assume it's a looping animation, so it'll sort of seamlessly...
Yeah, the end should just connect to the start. So I can just list a small object, and now it's just a longer animation. So swim, 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 swim. It's still swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think I've layered it over slightly there. I remember seeing this video of them testing the durability of the first Xbox. And the way they did it is they put the Xbox into a kind of like astronaut testing device where it would throw it all around a room. And it was connected by a cable to a TV that was just playing an animation of a shark swimming. And they just put this Xbox through hell. And if the shark was still swimming, the Xbox was working.
Oh, wow.
This is basically what we're doing. We're testing the limits of my animation capability. And if the fish continues to swim, it's been a success.
I'm going to have to find that. That sounds like a really bizarre way to test your console.
Yeah, I have no idea where I saw that, and it's sort of hidden in the depths of my memory. Okay. All right, so we're going to put the same mask onto that fish. So it's disappeared now because it's hidden as if it's within the cabinet. And now our panels slide away. Now we're going to find the exact moment, which I think is at 10 seconds, where my glass jar starts to pop into place. And again, we're going to go down and add a keyframe to our fish. So we're saying you're at this point, you're in this position at this point in time before we start moving it. Now, if I slide the jar into place, the point where the jar stops, which is at 12 seconds, I will get my fish to make that same movement. And now, hopefully, we have jar emerging with fish moving into place at the same time with the water and the fish still animating.
That's amazing in Photoshop.
Yeah.
All in Photoshop.
No, I feel like I'm really... I'm sure there's lots more you could do, but for me, this is about as boundary pushing as I've got with Photoshop before.
It's great. It's so good.
Okay, so let's try.
I'll let you know because just to let you know, we've got about 20 minutes left.
Okay, great. We might be able to add one more element in that time, and we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Okay, so recapping, we've got top of cabinet slides to the side, drawer comes out, butterflies appear, drawers open, head comes out, panels start opening dinner's revealed, fish emerges. There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And the great thing about this being an isometric thing is because I don't have to worry, because the elements, each section of it is so editable. I can kind of just keep adding to this. I can keep moving stuff around. I don't have to plan that far ahead in terms of what's going to happen. I can just see where it goes in the end. One thing I should mention for people using Photoshop is one of the great things about this is that all the layers that you animated, they still just exist as layers. So I've just realized on this top of this glass jar, I've forgotten to shade in this gray section. And what I can do is I can just get my brush and get some color and start shading this in. It's a bit strong. So I'll just do some really basic shade on this glass jar section. And it just stays there. So if I say, okay, that's shaded now, it all still is part of the same layer. So I don't have to actually adjust any of my animation stuff. That keeps going.
Awesome.
Okay, so now that we've got this far, let's save everything.
Is that our first? Is that our first save?
Second save.
Second save. My God. Live on the edge.
I have Photoshop set up so it saves in the background every 5 minutes anyway.
All right.
Because
cool.
I've been hurt before, Flynn. I don't want to be hurt again.
We all have. We all have. You just reminded me as soon as anyone sort of says that.
What's your horror story of?
Oh, just design school. Back in the day was it was like literally like just not saving something that I was in college to spend 6 hours just to be there to do it, and didn't save it, and kind of those were the days where hopefully you learn when it's not as high stakes, like in an environment where it's not too bad. The only other real mistakes I've made is saving in the wrong spot or saving over a file. I think I'm still old school with my version control, which is a bit not great. And I have been known to occasionally save over the wrong version and sort of end up with something just thinking, where's all that work that I did last week, and realizing my mistake way too late. That's my Achilles heel, I think.
Okay, so I had this other section here that I was hoping to add in, and I've just left it as a sketch stage because, to be honest, I didn't think we'd make it that far, but we are. So we're going to try and illustrate this as quick as possible. So I wanted this to be kind of like this little snow. I was kind of thinking about like, what else can I do with the basic animation functions that Photoshop has? And one of the things you can do is you can move things, but you can also rotate them and you can expand them. And I'm gonna say rotation is a little on the trickier end, so I'm just going to do a bit of expanding of something. So I'm going to really quickly sketch this platform for the snow globe up. Might have a couple of sort of cable things coming out the sides. Sort of real life equivalent of not saving your work, which almost occurred this morning, which I was retelling to Flynn when we first started the stream, was if people are just tuning in, I've been moving house, so I'm currently in an empty house with an internet connection while I move into my new place. I have been coming back incrementally and cleaning up the apartment, and I managed to leave the front door wide open all of last night onto the street with all of my computers inside, which I think is kind of the real life version of not saving your work.
Yeah, that's so true.
But amazingly, everything was in exactly the same position when I got here this morning. So benefits of living in a quiet suburb.
Wow, that feeling of seeing your door open and just the sinking feeling that you would have felt at whatever time it was this very
Yeah,
early by
I had a little
yourself
moment.
doesn't feel good.
No, no, but everything came good in the end. So I'm just really quickly knocking out this cute little house that's going to go in the center of our snow globe. So that'll do for now. Put in with a bit of color.
We have another story like similar to the saving vein from Seth. I'm going to repeat this because I like the idea of I'm just going to share this just to save someone perhaps one day. Saying FYI, if you change canvas size and have a liquify on a smart object, it will tweak out or delete the liquify, and if you undo, it won't restore your old liquify.
Oh God.
Wow, that's getting into the technical side of things, but yeah.
Yeah.
He said he hopes that helps save someone else one day. That's good. Thanks for sharing, Seth.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that terrible thing happened to you when it happened. I'm guessing. Okay. Trying to just really keep this thing nice and quick. Okay, we've got a cute little house and platform now. Now, what I wanted was sort of this sort of fishbowl to appear on top. So I'm going to make that on a separate layer. So if I grab my circle tool, let's just draw a big bulb. Now in Photoshop, it gives you different functions if something's just a raster layer compared to if it's a smart object. And that's because of pixels. So if you're animating something that is zooming in and out, you want the smart object which has the pixel information embedded in the file as opposed to a raster object, which you'll start getting pixelation by things zooming in and out. So because we want this bulb to zoom in and out, to expand, we're going to want it to be a smart object, and that's very easy to do. We'll just give it a bit of a blue glow to it, and now let's add a bit of soft shading around this glass bulb. Just going to add a bit of blue there, a bit of a white highlight along here. That'll do. And now if I just have two layers, or I can even just use one layer. Just click it and you right click and say convert to smart object, and then you get that little symbol on your layers telling you that it's a smart object. Okay, so we've got our bulb and we've got our little tower there, and oh, sorry, we've just gone into the smart object there. We've got those two, and again, I'm just going to drag those into our animation file. Now, we're going to go through the same motions as we did for the glass vase with a couple of small differences. So if I go back to where we were in the animation, to be revealed, I will find my bulb and house. Where are they?
So many layers now.
Oh yeah, I'm getting pretty deep into layer territory. Here they are. Okay. So we want those to be in place just as the panel's about to move out of the way. But again, we need to mask them in the correct position. So if I lose the correct panel for a second,
It's a really cute little house.
Thanks.
Reminds me of the Simpsons house with the colors a little bit there.
Yeah. Um, okay, so I'm gonna mask that guy so he sits within the cabinet. So he's just going to sit down there. And because this is a smart object, I can change the size of it. So it's going to be a tiny little bulb to start. So it fits inside the cabinet. Let me just move both of those down. And then the whole idea of the animation with this section is that the bulb will expand to a position where it couldn't have fitted into the cabinet. So you get sort of this extra sort of evolving of the animation as it goes along. So we had panel just on top of that. And now our panel slides away to reveal both of those. Now, I think I want to let the two animations of the fish emerging and the balloon house emerging, I want them to sort of happen at different times. So I'm going to extend the length of both of those layers. And once our fish has emerged, about here, let's say at 12 seconds, we'll get the balloon and the house to start emerging as well. So again, I'm going to go through the motions of adding a keyframe to our balloon, and we're going to add a keyframe to our house. Then we'll give it 2 seconds for both of those to slowly appear. So they're going to rise out of our cabinet to about here. Again, we've lost our panel, so I just need to go through and find those and extend them. All right, we've got our panels back. So now our fish emerges swimming around, and then our balloon comes just afterwards.
Awesome.
So just when it stops moving, what I can do now is go back into my balloon, and I want it to expand. How long have we got, Flynn, until... Are we going to questions or till the end?
We might have time for 1 or 2 questions, but we don't want to get hard cut off from Behance. It can be a harsh mistress. So we've got about
Sure.
6 minutes, a little bit over 6 minutes. We kind of want to be winding down.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I've got to here, and then I just want this balloon to expand over the next couple seconds there. So let's give it a generous 2 seconds for this thing to expand. So I'm going to grab my balloon. It stops moving at 14 seconds, and it's 16 seconds. So I'm transforming it now. So I'm going to expand it up and position it again. And it's added a new keyframe. Now it emerges and expands. Okay, now I just need to extend, if we're going to call that the end of the animation for now, we're going to cap it there. So I'm going to leave it running for a little bit. And now I just need all the elements to continue to that endpoint. So I'm just going to quickly realign all our sections to that frame. Just making sure that's the case. Yeah. Move our fish down to there. Going to expand all of these out.
I always catch myself just silently kind of watching you. It's very mesmerizing kind of watching you work. Usually the hard thing is getting me to shut up, but I keep catching myself just kind of leaning forward and staring at everything that's going on. I don't know why. I don't know why that is about your work. It's a compliment. There's a
Okay.
compliment in there. There's a compliment in there, I
Yeah, yeah,
promise.
yeah. No, I felt it. Okay, okay. So let's zoom right out. It's not going to be a perfect finish. It's going to be a little messy, but for the most part, okay, it's looking pretty cool.
It's
Okay,
amazing.
so if we zoom back in. Okay. Da, 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 da. All the sections are coming out. Our balloon's coming out and it's expanding. Okay. We've just got one or two elements that are peeping over that final line. So give me 1 second and I'm going
Nice.
to find them. It's just that one. Okay, there's going to be a little extra gap there, but for the most part, we've got animation. Okay, brilliant.
It's incredible.
Well, wow, got a lot more done than I thought. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to start rendering that bad boy, um, and I will switch back to here, and we're done. Thank you, everybody,
Wow.
for watching. That
Incredible.
was a marathon.
Yeah. This is the last couple of times that we've been on together. You have really flown through because you work so quickly, and obviously there's questions and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite hard to time like how long a live stream is going to go, and then there's chat and all sorts of stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I think I remember the last stream we kind of finished in about 20 minutes, and then you ended up just doing some other incredible stuff
Just
while we were on the
winging it
stream.
for the next hour.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and we'll wait for this thing to render.
yeah,
And yeah, yeah, it's been fun. It's sort of a learning process for me. I'm trying to just sort of make sure I remember how all the animation works so I can explain
mm,
it. It's actually trying to describe what I'm doing to someone else is actually a fantastic way to sort of visualize it for yourself and remember what's going on. So
yeah. I think
it's a lesson
that's a
for
common.
everyone.
It's a
Teach what you
common
don't
thing.
entirely know.
Sorry, you say that one more time.
I was just saying it's a lesson for everyone to teach what they're not entirely confident of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's with a lot of teaching, a lot of people that teach and train. I think they discover that they have to actually really think about why they're doing things the way they do it,
Yeah,
and how they explain it, and by doing that process and thinking how would I explain this to somebody else, they actually learn quite a lot themselves. So it's a good feedback loop in that sense. We do have time for a couple of questions. I had one from before. Where are we? Um, do you have advice for people looking to upskill in drawing or illustration? It's just a great question to send out, like to try kind of a general audience. Like, obviously you've been drawing your whole life, but for people that might be interested in getting into it, what would you say to that question?
yeah, it's a bit complicated right now. In the times that we're living in, because my stock standard piece of advice to everyone is to go out and find a life drawing lesson that they can do. I
Mm,
think drawing the human body is the most difficult thing you can do. So if you make progress with that, everything's going to catch up with it, and I
mm,
mean everything. There are people who I talk to who are 3D animation artists, and they go on about the importance of life drawing. It just sort of
yeah.
helps everything. But it's quite difficult right now because all those schools will be closed. Um, so, I mean, well, that's kind of my standard piece of advice. And there is lots you can do online. There's lots of websites that have reference for life drawing. It's something you can draw the people that you quarantine with, clothed or unclothed. Um, uh, and there's lots of places that are running classes via Zoom. So I think the National Gallery of Victoria is doing sessions where they have cameras that will go in and you can sketch their statues, which is another way of
Mm,
drawing the figure, which is really helpful. So they're running a bunch of sessions where you can draw along with art teachers there. So that's a really good way to do it. But the other thing is just having some kind of, it doesn't have to be a strict routine, but some way that you will be drawing every day. It just has to become a continual practice. And for me, it's sort of like it's sort of been a lifelong obsession. So there's not really any work that I put into practicing because I'm just doing it all the time. And I know that's hard to manufacture if you're not coming from that place. But just having some sort of quota for yourself about, like, I'll be doing at least an hour of drawing a day or something like that really, really helps. It's something you can always kind of be doing. I mean, to a certain extent, like I used to work as a delivery driver, and you can't draw in delivery drive. But when I worked in retail, I would always have like a little sketchbook under the counter that I would be scribbling away in or something like that. So you can always get around ways to find a couple minutes in your day to draw.
You could like sketch on your commute, not right now, but yeah, you could sketch on your commute or something like that.
Your commute. I have an iPad that I've been doing lots of sketching while on the train or something with, and that's been fantastic. The iPad's almost been a bit of a problem in that there were like times of the day that there were situations where I couldn't be drawing fully, like if I was on a bus or on a plane or something like that, and getting an iPad just like removed all the excuses to potentially not be drawing. So pulling back on that one a little bit.
Nice.
But so those would be my pieces of advice. Find somewhere to draw the figure from life or from a statue or something like that, and to draw all the time. Those would be my main things.
Awesome. That's great advice, and that does take us to time. So just so we don't get cut off or anything like that, it's been absolutely incredible, and we're looking forward to having you back on Adobe Live.
Brilliant.
Good luck with the move, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Flynn, and thanks everyone for watching. It's been really fun, so I'd love to do it again.
Awesome, and thank you, chat. See you later, guys. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.